So finally onto the carburetors. Triple Amal Concentric Mark 1 carbs, 600 series, as fitted to all Tridents and Rocket 3s. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking these apart, taking them off the gantry, because there's a gantry system on Trident, so you don't have three. It's a good system, so you don't have three throttle cables. You have one throttle cable that operates on a gantry, then the gantry opens and closes the throttle, which is a good idea to try and eliminate. You've got three cables, then it's easy to have them misaligned. These three cables are actually the choke cable. Okay, so that's why this cable's there at the moment. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be taking them apart, then we're going to be assessing them in terms of whether they need refurbishment or whatever. Then we're going to be looking at how the carburetor actually works and the different phases, different parts of the carburetor, the pilot circuit and the main, main circuit. And then we're going to be refurbishing them and then putting them all together, and we're going to be comparing these to the new Amal Premier carburetors, what's different, and whether to upgrade or whatever. So we're going to be doing a comprehensive look at these carburetors. So there's probably going to be several videos worth just on the carbs, because I think it's worth it, because they are so central to getting your bike running properly. Right, so to begin with, we're going to start the dismantling process. Right, we're going to start dismantling, and I hopefully this will stay on camera, because it's difficult for me to see the camera, what you can see, and so sometimes I might move things out of shot, as it were, so I'll try not to. So the first thing we're going to do is remove this sort of throttle bar here. That these throttle rods are what go down into the carburetors, these three fine rods here, if you can see them, and these rods attach to the throttle bar, so we're going to take that off so we can remove the tops of the carburetors. So we're on Whitworth, we're going to loosen the locking nuts on the top of the throttle rods. Let's go left-handed. Okay, so now we've loosened them, then we're going to unscrew the nuts, or in this case screw the throttle rods in. Oh, let me just say that I know we're doing the Trident here, but what we're going to do now in terms of looking at the carburetors and so on is the same for all British bikes that were fitted with Amal Concentrics, which I think in most British bikes from the sort of late 60s, early 70s. Okay, and then the throttle bar will just slide out. Okay, and in this case I'm going to take this bar out as well if I can, just to get it out of the way. That should have circlips. This bar here that I'm taking out now should have a circlip on either end to stop it sliding out, as I'm doing now, but the circlips are missing, so I might as well just take it out. Get it out of the way, just so we've got a bit of room to move, a bit of room to work on. So then I'm going to remove the tops from the carbs so we can get the cables and the choke out of the way. Right, before I take them apart, I'm just going to check the play in the throttle slide. So I'm going to have the choke fully open, and then I'm going to put fingers either side and see. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the actual throttle slides now, these slides, and seeing how much wear there is on them, because one thing that Amal carbs are well known for is wear in the throttle slides. Now, when these throttle slides wear in the body, actually it's more the body that wears, but anyway, when they wear, then that causes problems, because what happens is air goes around the side of the body, which it shouldn't do, and completely messes up the mixture, because obviously the mixture is finely controlled, and so if you've got air going in around the side of these, which is very, very common, then that can totally bugger up the mixture, especially at tick over, and that's why you get uneven tick over. Well, can be one reason. very common. Now you might better hear that, but there is, as I expected, quite a bit of play in each of the throttle valves. So which I would expect. 9 carbs out of 10, if not 10 out of 10 carbs that have seen some mileage, the throttle bodies wear, because it's certainly on original carburetors, original Amals, they wore out really quickly, surprisingly quickly. So you know, a couple of thousand miles and you're starting to have problems. So that's something to be aware of, so that when you're taking your original carbs apart, be aware that you're almost certainly looking at either refurbishment or replacement, because they are so prone to wear. So that's the first one out, and out will come the next. So I'll just quickly go through it. So that is the choke. So if I put the choke on, you should be able to see. Then it would slide. Normally it would slide down, but because it's already down. So that's the actual choke bar. That's the throttle slide, and this is the throttle needle. Okay, those are sort of main parts. I'm going to actually chronicle most of the work rather than sort of jumping and editing a lot. Of course I will be when I get my words all muddled up, as I normally do, and so on, and someone rings the doorbell. There will be some edits, but I'm going to try and show virtually all the work, because I think it's so important with carburetors. Or I'm going to show as much of the work as I can. If I showed all the work, it would go on for days. And there we go, and the third throttle slide is out. So then we're going to start taking the carbs off the gantry. So the first thing I think we'll do is, it's awkward, but we'll try and remove the choke first to get it out of the way. So on the carbs are held together, held on the gantry by these nuts on studs, apart from this choke cable, which is actually a bolt with a nut on the end. So we're going to remove that first and carry on from there. Now what I should probably do is go off camera now, having just said I was not going to do that, because all I'm going to do is I'm going to get a couple of spanners and remove this bolt to get the choke lever out of the way. Okay, I've got the choke lever off by removing the clamping bolt at the end, and all I'm going to do now is then go on to remove these flange nuts from the other 3 carbs, the other 2 carbs and the other one on that side, and get the carbs off the gantry. Then we can start inspecting the carbs properly. Right, so I've got the carbs off the gantry. A couple of things to note. It's easiest probably taking the 2 outside carbs off first, so you can get to the nuts on the center carb. Also, we're generally on the carbs we're using Whitworth spanners. So I've taken the fuel pipe off the bottom so that I could separate the carbs. I might well be reusing this fuel pipe, so I wanted to keep it. So the bottom nuts on the to hold the fuel pipes on, they're Whitworth, and also when I undid those throttle rods, you know, the throttle rods on the top of the these throttle rods, the lock nuts are also Whitworth. But of course the nuts holding the carbs onto the gantry are AF, Imperial, can't think of the word. Right, okay, so I've taken these off. We're going to take the actual carb apart now, and so we can see all the constituent parts. Just worth noting that there is a fuel filter in the bottom of where these where the fuel pipe bolts onto. Okay, these are all little gauze filters. So just worth bearing in mind, you know, that they can get blocked. Unlikely, but be aware that there are filters there. Okay, we're just going to then take the float bowl off the centre carb, held on again by two crosshead screws. In this case there's only one, there's one missing. It came to me with, someone had been messing with the carbs and it came to me with the carbs half off, so get rid of the two, or in this case one, and off comes the oh, there we go, the float bowl. So these are really original carbs. So this is, that's the washing machine. Go on, blimey. I'll have to go and turn that off because it will keep bleeping for half an hour otherwise. Right, hurrah, we've got a bit of peace and quiet now. So this is the float needle, which clips onto the float. This is the float, and the float needle goes in there, that hole. And so what happens is, the basic principle is when the float bowl fills full of petrol, which comes up through here, then the float comes up and the needle goes down, and then that stops any more petrol coming into the float bowl, because of course it's gravity fed fuel from the tank, so it comes down and then flows up until it fills the bowl, the float rises and the needle closes, stops the petrol. So other problems you can have, these are original, you can have holes in the actual float. These are okay, you can take them apart and shake, well, you can shake it, and you know, if it's if there's a sloshing, they can have holes in. This is like a prehistoric float needle. We'll be comparing these with I'll compare them with a new carbs shortly. So this is a plastic float needle, which probably won't seal that well. So what you can often have is flooding, because in other words, when the needle goes down, it's not sealing fully, and so petrol keeps on coming into the carb, into the float bowl, and petrol pours out of the carb. So that's one reason that isn't sealing properly, the float needle. Then in the bottom of the float bowl you've got this, which is a drain plug, and in there that catches all the sediment, anything that gets past this filter. There's a filter. Okay, anything that gets past there ends up there, so you can take those off and clean them out. There's also, of course, a filter in the fuel tap. So that's the first. That's the one that tends to get blocked, if any get blocked. Then there's this filter, and then you've got the sludge or sediment trap, which is this screw at the bottom. Okay, so we've got the float bowl, we've got the float, we've got the float needle, and this is the sort of arm that it balances on, or it sort of rotates on. Okay, then we've got the actual carb itself. So here we have this is the main jet, which should be 150. It'll be stamped on it. I don't know if you can see in this light, probably with a camera, I don't know. See if I can get that up. Yeah, see it says 150. Yeah, is that focusing? I can't work out how to do manual focus on this video, I'm afraid. Yeah, so that's a 150 jet, which is what it should be. Then let's see, are we on Whitworth? Yes, we are. I'm trying to remember. There we go. So then the main jet unscrews, and there we have, on the other end, we have the needle jet. Okay, this is the jet that the needle will go into. You know, it sits there in the carb, goes up and down, and that needle then goes into the needle jet. And when we open the throttle, that regulates how much fuel goes in. When you're on full throttle, that's regulated by this main jet, and only on full throttle. Then the amount of fuel going in during the rest of the rev range is controlled by the size of this needle, position of this needle, the height of it, and the size of the needle jet. I'm trying to remember what size we've got here. Yeah, 106 is in. Crikey, I can't remember. Yeah, I think it's 106. Let's give it a quick clean. I think that's the standard the standard size. Yeah, 106. So I'll try and show you that. Let's have a look. I don't know if it will focus. There it says 106 just above the hole here where my thumbnail is. Okay, so that on the top is a needle jet, at the bottom is the main jet. Then you've got the actual carburetor body. This is a standard original Amal carb body, and somewhere in here is what's called the pilot jet, because on these original carbs you can't get to the pilot jet. It's actually in the body. To be honest, I'm never quite sure where it is. I've taken these caps off before. It's not under that cap. I don't know where it is. Okay, on later cars we'll look at them. There is a removable pilot jet. Okay, now the thing to remember about a carburetor, these carburetors, is they're basically two carburetors in one. You've got a pilot circuit and then you've got the main circuit. So when you're at tick over, you're just using the pilot circuit, and as soon as you open the throttle and go out on the open road, you're using the main circuit, the throttle slides and so on. But at tick over, you're not using these. You're just using the pilot circuit, which is just so that basically this throttle will be closed, and the pilot circuit will just be is sorting out the mixture to make sure you've got a nice even tick over, allegedly. And with these carburetors in particular, you have a problem because that pilot, like I said, the pilot jet is in the middle there somewhere. You see these are actually drillings for airways to let air in to the pilot circuit and so on, and they block up. That's the classic thing on the Amal Concentric, is the pilot circuit blocks up, and that's the problem. You can't really get to it to clear it out. You don't really know if it's blocked. You just maybe have a rough run-in. Well, what's causing that? Is it the pilot jet? So what if you're going to reuse these standard carbs, I'll talk about this in a minute, you need to try and clear out these pilot jets absolutely, so you're 100% certain they're clear. Now often they really clog up, so you actually need a very thin piece of wire. People often use like a guitar string to put down the various airways, in particular this one, to try and clean out the, the pilot jets. All right, so that's a main problem with these concentrics. This is the air screw, and this is what you adjust when the bike's running, when you're setting the bike up. This is what you adjust to set the mixture on the tick over. Now a lot of people confuse this. They say that's the mixture screw for the whole carburetor. No, it's the mixture screw for the pilot, for the tick over. When you open the throttle, then that's not really doing much. That sets the mixture for tick over for the pilot circuit, and the standard setting for that is to screw in until it stops and then out 1.5. So a half, 1, 1.5, and that's the basic setting that you start from. But it doesn't control the mixture for the main throttle. All right, be aware of that. That's only the pilot air screw for the pilot circuit. Okay, so what happens is these tend to wear, the bodies wear, and so that's when the throttle slides are loose in the body. Air gets around there. That's another problem. Right, now we're going to take the throttle slides off so we can see the throttle slides, the choke and the choke needle. Now the jet needle. Okay, so the throttle slide, the needle and the choke. So it's a bit awkward, but what we have to do is see if we have to pull the spring out. There we go, and then lodge it out of the way. Oh God, this has got all the originals in it. Oh, blimey. It's all right. Original carbs. They've got extra collets and things in, which this has, and they're a complete pain to get out. So, oh, crikey! But they're unnecessary. I'll show you them. I'm going to get them out first, and then I'll show you them because they're obsolete. Even if you reuse your carbs, you don't need them. I'll show you them when I get them out. Okay, I've got the throttle slide off now. Okay, I'll try and explain what I was saying, why it's particularly difficult on an original Trident. Now this is a throttle rod which I've pulled out of the top now, and that sits on a spring which goes underneath sits underneath the cap there, and then the spring goes down onto the top of the valve. And what happens is, if you look down in there, there's two holes, one is bigger than the other. And how this works is, you put the end of the throttle rod or cable, if it's in the case of a Trident, it's a throttle rod. You put the you put the cable down through that hole, but then if you slide it across to the next hole, when it comes back up, it's jammed because that's a smaller hole. So that's how the whole thing goes together. You put it in to the smaller hole, move it across, and then it's locked and it's held on, and it can't move because it's on this big spring. But on a Trident, the original ones, they decided that that spring wasn't enough, so they actually added some extra springs. So there's a spring, this little spring here, with a washer on the bottom, and then with a collet on the top, and that makes it almost impossible to do. I have done it a couple of times, but trying to get, it's bad enough trying to get this spring on with everything in place, but trying to fit this as well at the same time, complete nightmare. But that's how they did it. But we now realise that even with the original carbs, you don't need all that. Okay, even if you're going to reuse the carbs, just put them back just with that spring. That's fine. And obviously we need to make sure. So now we've got it apart, we check that the needle is not scratched or bent, and that the clip at the top is in the right groove. See if this will focus. Is that focusing? So there are 3 grooves. Sometimes you get as many as 5 depending on the setup. See if I can get it to focus. I can't see the back of the camera. Yeah, so this, and I think that's the correct one. I'll check, and it's in the top groove, the 3rd groove, which I think is the right one for the Trident. I'll check it, because obviously basically the higher up, the leaner it is, because the needle sits lower in the needle jet, and so allows less fuel through. The higher up the needle is, in other words, the lower that clip is, then that lets more fuel in and makes it richer. And each carburetor is specified where that clip goes, and I think it should be on the top where it is now. Okay, so I'm just going to lose the choke for a minute. Whew. Let's see if I can work this one out. So we have the carburetor, which is basically 2 carburetors. We have a pilot circuit and we have the main circuit. The pilot circuit is small airways, and that deals with the tick over on the bike, idling. And we can adjust the mixture of the idling using the pilot mixture screw, which is that one. Okay. Some carbs, like on other bikes, they'll have a drill in there, and that's to adjust the actual tick over speed. That actually presses on the bottom of the slide and will actually move it up, so you can adjust the tick over. But on a Trident, you just have that one, and that one's blanked off. Okay, now the idle circuit on, I think that the pilot jet is actually in here. No, it's in here behind the screw. Okay, that's where the pilot jet is, which I think is a 17. Yeah, it's a 17, I think, pilot jet. But it's fixed, you can't take it out. It does tend to block up, and it's a bit of a nightmare. But that's the pilot circuit. Then you come to the actual main carburetor, and when you open the throttle, go off pilot circuit, then the mixture is controlled by various things. As you raise the throttle, the needle opens, and that comes out of the needle jet and allows more fuel in. Also, as you raise the throttle slide goes up, lets more air in, so you're letting more air in and more fuel in, so you're going faster. Okay, now if you want to adjust the mixture of the carburetor, you know, let's say you think it's running too rich at half throttle, you don't mess about with a screw because that's only going to do pilot. The only ways you can change the richness of the actual running, like say at half throttle, is by changing the needle position, changing the pilot jet, changing the needle jet, or changing the cutaway size of the throttle slide, because you can have bigger or smaller ones which either allow more or less air in. I think these are 3.5 or 4s. Yeah, 3.5. Don't know if you can see that. Again, I can't see the camera. So can you see it says 3.5 there? That's the size. That is the size of the cutaway, which I think is standard. So if you think your bike is running, say, too rich at full throttle, then you'll normally change the main jet. The main jet only comes into play at full throttle. Okay, so if you don't think about changing that, if you're running rich at half throttle, think, well, maybe it's the main jet. No, it might be the needle jet. The main jet only comes into play at full throttle. Okay, so I hope that's the way the carb works. Problems we have: this wears and this wears, that lets air in. The pilot circuit is prone to blocking, and that creates all sorts of horrible problems, especially at low revs. These jets can wear, these jets can block. The needle can get scratched or bent, causes very uneven running and so on. They can flood because the needle on the float needle doesn't work properly. They can flood because the float gets punctured and it doesn't actually float, so it still lets fuel in. They can leak because these flanges can be over tightened on the bowl, and that bends, and then so there's a leak in the bowl, between the bowl and the carb body, and so they can leak out of there, even if everything else is okay. They can block with sediment in the filters. Oh yeah, and of course the flanges are prone. These flanges are also like these flanges, the flanges of the actual carburetor, where you bolt them to the gantry or to your manifold, depending on which model you've got. On a Trident, it's this gantry. These can bend if you over tighten them, and again you'll get an air leak. So air leaks really bad because they mess up all your settings. You know, if it's leaking air through there, or above all past this throttle slide. So it's important that we don't have air leaks. It's important that pilot jets aren't blocked, and that the main jets and needle jets not blocked, and that this needle is straight and not scratched, and the clip is in the right position. Those are the main things we're looking for when we're stripping down a carb. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there for today, and then tomorrow we're going to compare these carbs with a new Premier Amal carb, and we can see the differences, and then we're going to decide whether to refurbish these old carburetors or to simply buy new Premier carbs and replace them. All right, and we'll look at the pros and cons of the different ones.